Queen Silthari stood on the balcony of her palace and looked down at the thousands of guests who had come to watch her wedding. She was the ruler of the Valorian Dominion, the most powerful empire in the known galaxy. Her people lived for thousands of years. They had conquered hundreds of star systems. They had ships that could destroy entire planets. And today, she was marrying a human. The thought almost made her laugh. Humans were such small creatures. They lived for less than 100 years. Their bodies were weak. They had no natural weapons, no claws, no armor. They had only discovered space travel 300 years ago. In the eyes of the Valorians, humans were like children playing in a garden, while giants walked around them. But children could be useful. 6 months ago, the human colony called New Geneva had sent a desperate message to her empire. The Kethra swarm was coming to destroy them. The Kethra were insect-like creatures who consumed everything in their path. They had already eaten 3 human worlds. New Geneva would be next, unless someone helped them. The humans had nothing to offer. No technology, no resources, no military power. So they offered the only thing they had. A marriage alliance. Silthari had accepted because she was curious. No Valorian royal had ever married outside their species. It would be an interesting experiment. A pet project. Something to pass the time for a few decades until the human died of old age. The man they sent was called James Mercer. He was a commander in the human military. The reports said he was some kind of war hero. He had defended a place called the Martian Line for 18 days against impossible odds. His superiors called him brilliant. His enemies called him stubborn. His soldiers called him the wall that would not fall. Silthari did not care about any of this. He was still just a human. He would still grow old. He would still die. What did 18 days matter to someone who had lived for 2,000 years? She watched as James walked through the crowd toward the altar. He was tall for a human, but still shorter than most Valorians. His hair was dark with some gray at the sides. His face was calm. He did not seem nervous at all. This surprised her. The guests around him were some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Admirals who had destroyed civilizations. Lords who owned entire star systems. Creatures who had been alive when humanity still lived in caves. Any sane person would be terrified. But James Mercer walked through them like he was taking a morning walk. His eyes moved across the crowd, not with fear, but with calculation. He was studying them, measuring them, like a predator sizing up the competition. Silthari felt something strange, a small flicker of interest. The ceremony was long and filled with ancient traditions. James stood through all of it without complaint. He spoke the vows in perfect Valorian, even though the language had 7 different tones and most aliens could never learn them properly. His pronunciation was not perfect, but it was close. When did he learn that? The marriage had only been arranged 6 months ago. You may now seal the bond, the priest announced. Silthari leaned down and pressed her forehead to his. It was the Valorian way. She expected him to flinch at the touch of her cool skin. He did not. "Welcome to the Dominion, husband," she said quietly. "Thank you, wife," he replied. His voice was steady. "I look forward to exceeding your expectations." There was something in his tone. Not arrogance, not fear. Something else. Something she could not identify. The celebration lasted for 3 days. Silthari watched James move through the parties with grace she had not expected. He spoke to admirals about battle tactics. He discussed art with ancient scholars. He listened more than he talked. And when he did speak, people leaned in to hear him. By the end of the 3rd day, she heard whispers among her court. "The human is not what I expected. He asked me about the trade routes through the nebula. He already knew more than most of my officers. His eyes. Did you see his eyes? There is something behind them." Silthari dismissed these comments. Her people were easily impressed by novelty. The human was simply new and different. The interest would fade. On their wedding night, she found James standing at the window of their chambers, looking out at the stars. "You should sleep," she said. "Humans need sleep." "I will," he said. "I was just thinking." "About what?" "About how many of those stars have planets with people on them. People living their lives, having children, building things." He turned to look at her. "Your empire protects them. That is something worth respecting." Silthari studied him. In the starlight, she could see the small scars on his hands and face, old wounds that had healed but left their marks. Signs of a hard life. You accepted this marriage very easily, she said. Most humans would be terrified to leave everything they know. Most humans do not have the chance to make a difference this big, he replied. New Geneva has 40 million people. My sacrifice saves them all. That is not a hard choice. Sacrifice. She tilted her head. You see this as a sacrifice? Don't you? He smiled slightly. It was the first time she had seen him smile. I will grow old while you stay young. I will die while you continue living. In the eyes of your people, I am already dead. Just taking my time about it. Does that not frighten you? James was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke. Your Majesty, I come from a species that has always known it will die. Every human who has ever lived knew that their time was limited. We do not have thousands of years to wait for the right moment. We do not have the luxury of patience. His eyes met hers. So we learned to make every moment count. We learned to run toward danger instead of away from it. We learned to build things that would outlast us. He looked back at the stars. Humans are not frightened of death, Your Majesty. We are frightened of not mattering. Give us a chance to matter, and we will walk into hell itself with a smile. Silthari did not sleep that night. She lay in the darkness and thought about what he had said. She had lived for 2,000 years and conquered 100 worlds, but she had never met anyone who spoke about death the way James Mercer did, not as an enemy to be feared, but as an old friend who was always walking beside him. She did not understand it. She did not understand him, but for the first time in centuries, Queen Silthari of the Valorian Dominion was genuinely curious about another being, and that, perhaps, was the most dangerous thing of all. 3 years passed in the Valorian court, and James Mercer did not wither away as everyone expected. Silthari had thought the human would spend his days in quiet comfort. She had given him beautiful rooms, servants to attend him, and access to the greatest libraries in the galaxy. Most creatures in his position would have been happy to live in luxury until old age took them. James was not most creatures. Every morning, he woke before the sun rose over the capital city. He exercised for 2 hours, pushing his body through routines that left him soaked in sweat. Then he ate a simple breakfast and went to the archives to study. At first, the archivists laughed at him behind his back. A human trying to understand Valorian history? It would take him his entire short life just to learn the basics. Within 6 months, James could recite the genealogies of all 12 great houses. He knew which families had feuded with which, who owed debts to whom, and which alliances had lasted for 10,000 years. He understood the political currents of the court better than nobles who had lived there for centuries. The archivists stopped laughing. Silthari first noticed the change during a state dinner. Lord Vethran, one of the oldest and most powerful nobles, was speaking to James about trade policy. She expected to see James nodding politely while understanding nothing. Instead, she heard James say, "But Lord Vethran, if we follow that approach, House Kethviri will lose access to the mineral routes they have controlled since the third expansion. They will see it as an attack on their honor. Is that conflict worth the economic gain?" Lord Vethran stared at James for a long moment. Then he laughed. "The human understands court politics better than my own children," he said to Silthari later that evening. "Where did you find him?" "He found me," Silthari replied, and she was not entirely sure she was joking. The war with the Kithra swarm continued during these years. The insect creatures were relentless. They attacked colony after colony, consuming everything in their path. The Valorian fleets fought them back, but it was like fighting a tide. For every swarm they destroyed, 2 more appeared. James began attending the War Council meetings. At first, he sat in the back and said nothing. He simply watched and listened. The admirals ignored him. What could a human know about galactic warfare? Then came the day that changed everything. Admiral Vethkan stood before the War Council with a confident smile. He was over 8,000 years old. He had commanded fleets before humanity existed. His record was spotless. "The Kethro will attack the orbital shipyards next," he announced, pointing to a holographic map. "All our intelligence confirms it. I am moving our defensive fleet to intercept." "What about Orbital 7? James asked quietly from the back of the room. Everyone turned to look at him. Orbital 7 was a small communications station. It had no military value. Why would anyone attack it? "Orbital 7 is irrelevant," Admiral Vethkan said dismissively. "The shipyards are the obvious target. They build our warships. Destroying them would cripple our fleet production. The shipyards are the obvious target, James agreed. That is exactly why they will not attack it. Admiral Vethkon's face darkened with anger. You dare to question my judgment? I have been fighting wars since before your species discovered fire. With respect, Admiral, that is the problem. James stood up and walked toward the holographic map. You have been fighting wars for so long that you have forgotten how to think like someone desperate. The Kethra know they cannot defeat your fleets directly, so they will not try. They will attack your communications instead. He pointed at Orbital 7. This station controls the relay network for this entire sector. If they destroy it, your fleets will be blind and deaf for at least 3 days. In those 3 days, they can attack a dozen colonies before you even know they are coming. Admiral Vethkon laughed. This is human intuition? Guesswork based on nothing? This is human experience. James replied calmly. My species has been fighting wars for 200,000 years. We started with rocks and sticks, and we never stopped. We have fought every kind of war imaginable. And the first rule we learned is this: never do what your enemy expects. Silthari watched the exchange in silence. She saw how the other admirals shifted uncomfortably in their seats. She saw how James stood without fear before beings who could crush him with one hand. Move the fleet to the shipyards, Admiral Vethkon ordered. The human is wrong. 3 days later, the Kethra swarm destroyed Orbital 7. 40,000 Valorians died. In the chaos that followed, the swarm attacked 4 colonies before the fleet could respond. Admiral Vethkon never spoke against James again. That night, Silthari called James to her private chambers. She sat in her chair and studied him as he entered. He moved differently now than he had 3 years ago, more confident, more dangerous. How did you know? She asked. Because that is what I would have done, James said simply. When you are weaker than your enemy, you do not fight their strength. You attack their weakness. You make them blind. You make them confused. Then you strike where they are not looking. You think like them. Like the Kethra. I think like a predator, Your Majesty. James met her eyes without flinching. My species did not survive by being peaceful. We survived by being the most effective hunters on our planet. We killed anything that threatened us. We killed many things that did not threaten us. We even killed each other, in numbers that would horrify you. Silthari leaned forward. And yet, you seem so civilized. We learned to hide it. James smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We learned to wear suits and speak politely and build beautiful cities. But underneath all of that, we are still the same creatures who hunted mammoths with wooden spears. We still have the same instincts, the same hunger, the same willingness to do whatever it takes to survive. He posed. The galaxy looks at humans and sees weak creatures with short lives. They see prey. His eyes glittered in the lamplight. They do not realize that they are looking at the most successful predators in the history of Earth. We killed everything else. Everything. And when we ran out of things to kill, we started killing each other. Silthari felt something she had not felt in centuries. A small chill running down her spine. You are more than I expected, she said quietly. I told you I would exceed your expectations. James bowed his head slightly. I always keep my promises, Your Majesty. That night, after James left, Silthari went to her private archive and began reading human history. Not the diplomatic summaries, not the cleaned-up versions. The real history. The wars, the genocides, the endless, brutal struggle for survival. And for the first time, she understood why her council had begun listening to the human. It was not because he was smart. It was because he was dangerous. And some part of them, buried deep beneath 10,000 years of civilization, still remembered how to recognize a predator when they saw one. The assassin came on a night when both moons were dark. Silthari was in her private study, reading reports from the front lines of the war. James sat across from her, working on his own documents. They had fallen into a comfortable routine over the years. They often worked together in silence, each focused on their own tasks, but somehow drawing strength from the other's presence. Neither of them saw the shadow move behind the curtains. The assassin was Kethra, one of their elite infiltrators. These creatures could change their skin color to match any background. They could slow their heartbeat until they were almost invisible to sensors. They were the perfect killers. And they had been waiting in that room for 3 days, hidden in plain sight. The blade was made of crystal, sharp enough to cut through Valorian armor. The poison on its edge could kill in seconds. There was no cure. The assassin aimed for Silthari's heart. James moved first. Later, when people asked him how he knew, he could not explain it. Some part of his brain, some ancient instinct buried deep in human genetics, had sensed danger before his conscious mind understood it. His body was already moving before he finished thinking. He threw himself between Silthari and the blade. The crystal cut through his shoulder, slicing deep into muscle and bone. The pain was immediate and terrible, like fire spreading through his body. James felt the poison entering his blood, cold and wrong, but he did not stop. His free hand caught the assassin's wrist. He twisted with all his strength. The bones broke with a sound like snapping wood. The assassin screamed in a high, clicking voice. James did not let go. His other hand came up, fingers finding the assassin's eyes. He pushed his thumb deep into the socket. Blood and fluid sprayed across his face. The assassin thrashed and screamed louder. James kept pushing until the creature stopped moving. Then he fell. Silthari caught him before he hit the ground. Her hands were shaking. She had never seen anything move that fast. She had never seen such brutal efficiency. "Guards!" she screamed. "Physicians, now!" The palace erupted into chaos. Soldiers flooded the room. Physicians arrived with their equipment. But when they saw the black veins spreading up James's neck, their faces went pale. "The poison," the chief physician said quietly. "It is Kethra death venom. There is no antidote. His system is too simple to fight it." "Then find a way," Silthari commanded. "Do something. Your Majesty, a Valorian would be dead already. His organs should have shut down in seconds. The fact that he is still breathing is impossible." James opened his eyes. They were bloodshot and filled with pain. But he was conscious. "Patch the wound," he said, his voice rough. "Stop the bleeding. Keep me breathing. The poison will kill you," the physician protested. "Maybe." James coughed, and blood came up. "Maybe not. My body has been fighting off toxins since before my ancestors left the trees. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, every poison my planet could throw at us. We evolved to survive." He grabbed the physician's arm with surprising strength. "Patch the wound. Let my immune system do its job." The physicians looked at each other uncertainly. Then they looked at Silthari. "Do as he says," she ordered. They worked through the night. They sealed the wound. They gave him fluids. They monitored his vital signs as the black veins spread across his chest and down his arms. By morning, his heart had stopped twice. Both times, they brought him back. Silthari did not leave his side. She watched as his body fought an impossible battle. His temperature rose and fell wildly. He shook with fever. He muttered words in languages she did not understand. But through it all, the black veins, slowly, impossibly, began to fade. 72 hours after the attack, James Mercer opened his eyes. "Water," he croaked. The physicians stared at their instruments in disbelief. The poison was gone. His body had identified it, attacked it, and destroyed it, like it was just another infection to be fought off. "This is not possible," the chief physician whispered. "No species can metabolize death venom." "Humans can," James said weakly. "We are very hard to kill." When the physicians finally left, Silthari sat alone with James. He looked terrible. His skin was pale. His eyes were sunken. But he was alive. "You should be dead," she said. "Probably." He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Would not be the first time someone said that. You stepped in front of a blade meant for me." Silthari's voice was strange, filled with emotions she could not identify. "Why? If you had died, the alliance would have ended. Your people would have been free. Free to be conquered by the Kethra?" James shook his head slightly. "That is not freedom. That is delayed extinction. But why protect me? I am your captor, your owner, the one who took you from your people." James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "You are not what I expected, Silthari. When I came here, I thought you would be cold, cruel, just another alien who saw humans as insects. But you are not." He reached out and took her hand. His grip was weak, but warm. "You read books to children in the orphanages. You remember the names of every servant in the palace. You stayed awake for 3 days watching over a human you barely know. He squeezed her hand gently. You are a good person. The galaxy needs good people in power. So I protect you. Silthari felt tears forming in her eyes. She had not cried in over 1,000 years. And there is another reason, James continued. Humans do not abandon their own. I know I am just a political tool to you. I know this marriage is not real, but you are still my wife. In my culture, that means something. It means I protect you, even if it costs me my life. I never asked for your protection. You did not have to. James closed his eyes. He was exhausted, barely holding on to consciousness. That is what it means to be human. We protect what we love, whether it is wanted or not. Silthari sat in silence for a long time after he fell asleep. She thought about what he had said. About protection, about love, about what it meant to be human. And somewhere deep in her ancient heart, something changed. A wall that had stood for 2,000 years began to crack. She did not know it yet. But the human she had married as a curiosity had become something far more important. He had become someone she could not bear to lose. And that terrified her more than any assassin ever could. The Valorian dominion was dying. In all her 2,000 years, Silthari had never imagined she would see such a thing. Her empire had stood for 50,000 years. It had survived invasions, rebellions, and disasters that destroyed lesser civilizations. It was eternal. It was unbreakable, but it was breaking now. The Kethra had done something no one expected. They had made allies. 3 other species, all of them angry at Valorian dominance, had joined together in a grand coalition. For the first time in history, the Dominion faced enemies on all sides. The war went badly from the start. Valorian fleets were scattered across 1,000 star systems. The coalition attacked everywhere at once. They did not try to win decisive battles. They simply wore the Dominion down, attacking supply lines, destroying outposts, killing soldiers by the thousands. World after world fell silent. Communications went dark. Refugees flooded the core systems with stories of fire and death. In the War Council chamber, despair had replaced strategy. The great admirals and generals who had won victories for millennia now spoke of acceptable losses and managed decline. They whispered about surrender terms, about how much of the empire they could save. James Mercer sat in the corner and listened. He had recovered from the assassination attempt, but his body was still weak. He walked with a slight limp now. His shoulder never fully healed, but his mind was as sharp as ever. We must consolidate our forces, Admiral Vethkan said, pointing at the holographic map. Pull back to the core systems. Let them have the outer territories. We can rebuild in a century or two. A century of slavery for billions of people. Another admiral muttered. That is your plan? Do you have a better one? Silence filled the room. No one had a better plan. The mathematics were clear. The coalition had more ships, more soldiers, more resources. The Valorians were losing, and nothing could change that. James stood up. Every eye in the room turned to him. The human, the consort, the one who had no right to speak in a war council. You are fighting the wrong war, he said. Admiral Vethkan glared at him. And what would a human know about galactic warfare? More than you might think. James walked slowly toward the holographic map. His limp was visible, but his voice was strong. You are fighting this war like Valorians, patient, careful, defensive. You are trying to outlast your enemies, because that is what you have always done. You have time. You can afford to wait. He pointed at the map. But your enemies know this. They are not trying to beat your fleets. They are trying to exhaust your will to fight. They know that if they keep attacking long enough, you will choose peace over war. You will give them what they want just to make the bleeding stop. Then what do you suggest? The admiral's voice was mocking. Human recklessness, charging blindly at the enemy? Yes. James smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Exactly that. The room went very quiet. Humans do not have the luxury of time, James continued. We live short lives. We cannot wait for our enemies to grow old and weak. So we learn to fight differently. We learn to attack when everyone expected us to defend. We learn to take risks that other species would consider insane. He began manipulating the holographic display, moving fleet positions with quick, precise gestures. The coalition expects you to retreat, so you advance. They expect you to protect your core systems, so you attack theirs. They expect a war of attrition, so you give them a war of annihilation. Admiral Vethkan stared at the map. You are suggesting we abandon our defensive positions and attack their command structure directly? Yes, that is suicide. We would lose half our remaining fleet. Probably more than half. James nodded calmly. But the coalition's leadership would be destroyed. Their alliance would collapse. Without central command, their forces would turn on each other within weeks. They are not friends. They are enemies of enemies. Take away the common enemy, and they will remember why they hated each other. You are asking us to sacrifice millions of lives on a gamble. I am asking you to sacrifice millions of lives on a certainty. James's voice hardened. Because if you do not, you will lose everything. Not just millions, billions, every world in your empire, every person who trusted you to protect them, all of it, gone. Not in a blaze of glory, but in a slow, grinding surrender. He looked around the room at the ancient admirals and generals. This is how humans fight. We do not wait for death to come to us. We run toward it with our teeth bared. We make our enemies fear our desperation more than they value their victory. We make them understand that beating us will cost more than we are worth. Silthari watched her husband speak. She saw the fire in his eyes. She saw the creature that had killed an assassin with its bare hands while poison coursed through its veins. She saw, for the first time, what humanity truly was. Not prey, not children, not weak creatures to be pitied. Predators. The most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Predators who had been pretending to be civilized for so long that everyone forgot what they really were. Implement the consort strategy, she commanded. All of it. The room erupted in protests. It was too risky. Too many would die. It was madness. Silthari raised her hand, and silence fell. I have ruled this empire for 2,000 years. I have seen wars and famines and plagues. I have seen empires rise and fall. And I have never been more certain of anything than I am right now. She looked at James with something like pride. This human has survived things that would have killed any of us. He has seen what we cannot see. And I trust him with my empire. She turned back to the admirals. You have your orders. Dismissed. The Battle of the Crimson Nebula came 3 weeks later. James personally led the strike force against the Coalition Command Cluster. It was a mission with a 94% casualty rate. Almost everyone who went would die. James went anyway. The battle lasted 6 hours. It was brutal beyond description. Ships exploded like fireworks. Thousands died in the cold vacuum of space. The strike force was torn apart piece by piece, but they reached the command cluster. James's fighter was one of the last ones flying when they finally broke through the enemy lines. He launched his missiles at the Coalition flagship and watched it burn. Then enemy fire caught his ship. The rescue teams found him drifting in the wreckage 18 hours later. His fighter was destroyed. His life support was failing. He had 17 broken bones, but he was smiling. The Coalition command structure was gone. Their unified front collapsed within days. The alliance fell apart exactly as James had predicted. Species that had joined together against the Dominion now turned on each other, fighting over the scraps of their failed invasion. The war was not over. But for the first time in years, the Dominion was winning, and the name James Mercer was spoken with something like awe throughout the Empire. The human who had shown them how to fight, the mortal who had taught immortals how to win. The final battle came at a place called the Throne of Stars. It was an ancient space station, built before the Valorian Dominion existed. The Coalition's remaining leaders had gathered there for a last stand. They knew they were losing. They knew the war was over. But they refused to surrender. They had one final weapon. Silthari's fleet surrounded the station. Victory was certain. All they had to do was wait for the enemy to see reason and surrender. A few more days of negotiation, and it would be over. Then the Kethra Supreme appeared on every communication screen in the system. He was ancient, even by Kethra standards. His carapace was scarred from 100 battles. His eyes burned with hatred. Valorians, he said, his voice clicking and buzzing through the translators. You think you have won. You think this war is over. You are wrong. He held up a device. It was small, no larger than his hand. But every scientist in the fleet recognized what it was. A stellar igniter. This device will cause your sun to explode. the Supreme said. Every world in this system will burn. Every ship, every soldier, every civilian. Billions of your people will die in an instant. Silthari felt her blood go cold. Surrender your fleets, the Supreme continued. Give us everything we demanded at the start of this war, or we all burn together. The Valorian admirals exchanged terrified looks. The mathematics were clear. If they attacked the station, the Supreme would trigger the device. If they negotiated, they might save some of their people. Surrender was the logical choice. Silthari looked at James. He was standing at the back of the command center, still recovering from his injuries. His arm was in a sling. His face was pale, but his eyes were calm. Open a channel to the coalition, he said quietly. All frequencies. Every ship in their fleet needs to hear this. Silthari nodded to her communications officer. The channel opened. James walked slowly toward the main screen. He stood where everyone in the coalition fleet could see him. A human, a mortal, a creature who should have been insignificant in this war of giants. Supreme, he said, I have a counteroffer. The Kethra leader laughed. It was an ugly sound, like glass breaking. A human speaks? What could you possibly offer? Not an offer, James said. A promise. He took a step closer to the screen. You think we fear death? My species has stared into extinction more times than your people have written records. We have survived ice ages that killed most life on our planet. We have survived diseases that wiped out half our population. We have survived wars that killed millions in single days. His voice grew harder. We have killed each other in numbers that would make your entire coalition look like a playground fight. We have invented weapons that can destroy our whole world. And we built them anyway. Because humans do not back down from threats. We run toward them. The Kethra Supreme's laughter died away. You can trigger that device, James continued. You can kill me, my wife, and billions of others. And do you know what will happen next? He smiled. It was the smile of a predator, the smile of a species that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain and never forgotten how to bite. In 100 years, humanity will still be here. We have colonies you have never found, children you will never count, and they will remember. They will remember what you did here today, and they will come for you. James's voice dropped to something almost gentle. Not for conquest, not for territory, for remembrance. Humans have a saying, we will make a desert and call it peace. Do you know what that means? It means we will burn your worlds. We will destroy your colonies. We will hunt down every last member of your species, wherever they hide, however long it takes. Not because we want something from you, because we remember. He took another step forward. We are the species that invented spite. We will outlast your extinction out of pure stubbornness. We will build monuments to our dead on the ashes of your civilization. And in 10,000 years, when the last Kethra is a forgotten footnote in history, humans will still be telling stories about how we destroyed you. The silence was absolute. Every being in the coalition fleet was watching. Every being was listening. So go ahead, James said. Push the button. See what happens. He held out his hand. Or you can surrender. Now. Today. And I give you my word. The word of a mortal who has no time for long grudges. That your people will survive. This war ends today. One way or another. You choose how. The Kethra Supreme stared at James through the screen. His hand hovered over the stellar igniter. Seconds passed. They felt like hours. You are insane, the Supreme finally said. I am human. James did not blink. Same thing. More seconds passed. The Supreme's hand trembled. Then, slowly, he lowered his hand. We surrender. The coalition fleet stood down. The war was over. Silthari found James alone on the observation deck an hour later. He was staring out at the stars, his face unreadable. You would have let him do it, she said. You would have let him kill billions of people rather than surrender. No. James shook his head. I knew he would not do it. How? Because he wanted to live. James turned to look at her. The device was his last weapon, his only leverage. The moment he triggered it, he would die too. And beings who want to live do not choose death when there is any other option. But you threatened him with extinction. You told him humanity would destroy his entire species. I told him the truth. James's voice was tired but steady. Humans remember. We hold grudges for centuries. We build memorials to our dead and teach our children to hate the people who killed them. It is not our best quality, but it is real. Silthari moved closer to him. What you said about being insane, about spite, is that really what humanity is? James was quiet for a long moment. It is part of what we are, he finally said. The dark part. The part that let us survive when we should have died. The part that makes us dangerous. He reached out and took her hand. But it is not all of what we are. We also love. We also hope. We also build beautiful things and dream impossible dreams. He squeezed her hand gently. Humans are complicated. We have darkness and light in equal measure. The trick is learning when to use each one. Silthari stood with him as the stars wheeled slowly overhead. I am glad I married you, James Mercer, she said softly. Even though I am mortal? Even though I will grow old and die while you continue living? Even so. She leaned her head against his shoulder. You have shown me things I never knew existed. You have changed me in ways I do not fully understand, and I would not trade a single moment of it. James put his arm around her. Neither would I. Decades passed. James grew old. His hair turned white. His movements slowed. But his mind remained sharp, and his love for Silthari never faded. When he died at 94 years old, the Valorian Dominion declared a week of mourning. It was the first time in their history they had grieved for a non-Valorian. Ships across 1,000 systems dimmed their lights in his honor. Silthari stood at his funeral and spoke of the man who had exceeded all expectations, the human who had taught an empire how to fight, the mortal who had shown immortals what it meant to truly live, and in the great archives, where Valorian historians recorded the eternal truths of the universe, they added a new entry. It read, Never underestimate a human. They have so little time that they refuse to waste any of it on impossible odds. The queen lived for another 10,000 years. She ruled wisely and well. She had many advisors and many friends, but she never loved again. Some things, she learned, are too precious to replace, and some mortals leave marks that even eternity cannot erase.